Okay guys, going to have a quick look at crosswinds, crosswind takeoff, crosswind landings particularly. Basically the aircraft will behave differently with crosswind. So I've set this up. We're at Birmingham International Airport in the UK, Cessna 172. I've removed the auto coordination because actually in terms of handling crosswinds that can make it slightly harder. And then in addition to that, basically I've set up a 25 knot crosswind, 90 degrees to the runway pretty much, so it's coming from 270 westerly and our current heading's 330. So the first thing we need to consider is what's going to happen with the aircraft on the ground. Now, crosswind coming from the left, obviously it's going to try and move the aircraft to the right. However, at the start of our takeoff roll, we're not really flying, we're kind of like a big weathercock. So we've got a large tail, large vertical surface behind us with a wind from the left. So the first thing that's going to happen is the aircraft is going to want to turn into wind. Now obviously, instead of rolling over the grass somewhere over here by turning into the wind, what we want to do is follow our centre line. So initially what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to feed in some right rudder. Now what that will do is that will help us try and maintain the centre line, and it stops the weathercocking effect. However, as we then get faster and faster and faster, what eventually happens is we become more of a flying machine, the weight on the wheels lessens and we will start to drift to the right. What we then have to do is we then have to steer both using the rudder and the normal flight controls so that we're turning into wind to maintain the centre line. So let's have a look and see what happens then, and I'll describe and talk through what's happening. So I'm going to put a little bit of power on to start with. Remember, the slipstream from the propeller goes back over the rudder and over the tail. So the more power you have, the more of a slipstream you have caused by the propeller, and therefore the more effective your rudder is. So at low power settings you might find that the rudder is not very effective. The nose wheel steering is linked. It's linked by some spring dampers basically, so you get about 9 to 15 degrees authority through the nose wheel anyway, but obviously as you then increase your speed the nose wheel steering becomes less effective. So what I'm going to do is just take the brakes off. I'm not going to move any of the controls except for the throttle, and we'll see what happens with the wind from the left, and hopefully it will do exactly what we've said. Now you can see the aircraft's starting to turn to the left. It's starting to turn quite gently, so let's apply some right rudder and maintain our centre line, and then as I put the power in the rudder becomes more effective and we can get back to maintaining our centre line. A little bit wibbly wobbly because of the wind, but there we go. Now as we're getting up to 60 knots we're going to become light on our wheels, so you can see the aircraft's wanting to drift to the right, so as we take off we then need to steer to the left to maintain our centre line. Now the rudders are pretty much more central now. It's a very strong wind, so for a light aircraft, normally the crosswind limitations for light aircraft are generally about 25 knots, and we've got 25 knots, so we've set ourselves up pretty much on the limit of what an aircraft like this would accept. So now we're tracking pretty much along the centre line. We're climbing at 70 knots. Let me just trim the aircraft out a little bit so I don't have to fight the controls so much. And the test, the cast iron test now, is we'll just have a quick look outside and see whether we're tracking our centre line, and pretty much we are. You can see just how much we've canted off to maintain our flight position. The main reason for that is if we've got other traffic around, we don't want to cause a problem where we're flying straight towards them. So that's the takeoff, guys. As you can see, it's a little bit more complex with a crosswind than you would have with a landing, but there we go. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump forwards to the landing rather than fly the circuit at this point.